if you can. Let them know we're starting up again. We're right here. We're right here. So I was explaining the book, What Is to Be Done by Vladimir Lenin. Still got all your super chats. Still here. Please post the link in the old stream so that we can keep going here. Again, I just keep going. That's what we always do. Whatever. Here I am. Here I am. All right. So in the book, What Is to Be Done, Lenin is saying that in order for the Bolshevik Party to actually win, they need to drastically change their tactics. They need to drastically change their tactics, and they need to build a party of new type. So in Russia at the time, they had a political party called the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, the RSDLP. And the RSDLP was a pretty loose association of people. It was a loose association. The RSDLP was a loose association of people who basically, they all agreed with a general set of principles. They believed in Marxism. So they formed this party, the RSDLP, the party of the old type. And the RSDLP, it didn't have an official newspaper. Its newspapers, its press were private. Members of the group happened to own newspapers that they published Marxist views in it, but there was no official party newspaper. And they believed in Marxism. And generally what the RSDLP did is it bowed to spontaneity, or it engaged in tailism. And what that meant was that if there was a strike someplace, if there was an uprising, if there was a spontaneous revolt in Russian society, the RSDLP would go running, the members of the RSDLP would go running to wherever it was and shout, "Oh, we agree with you, and, there you go." And all kinds of rebellions and uprisings would happen, and the RSDLP and the Marxists of Russia, they would just go chasing after it. They would tail after it. They would engage in tailism, or bowing to spontaneity. Something spontaneous would happen, and they would run behind it going, "Wow, yeah, that's great," And generally, this didn't really change things very much. And the slogan that the RSDLP used to justify doing this is they said, "We are lending the economic struggle a political character," meaning that there was a strike, a group of workers, a group of workers went on strike. They went on strike, and they would run behind it and say, "Hey, we're a political party, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, and we support your strike. So you're engaged in an economic struggle for higher wages, and we are showing up and we are telling you that we're a political party that agrees with you. So we're lending the economic struggle a political character." That was their argument about why what they were doing was effective. And Vladimir Lenin said this doesn't matter, all right? These protests, these rebellions, they happen anyway. They happen anyway, whether you're there or not. But you just run behind them, and you bow to spontaneity. You just kind of, whatever spontaneously happens anyway, you support it. And then you run behind it announcing that, oh, you're a political party and you support it. That's not what needs to be done. Lenin argues that they instead need to form a vanguard party, a party of new type, and that this party will engage in agitation and propaganda. And that whenever there's a spontaneous rebellion among the masses, that this party will be like a bellows, right? It's like when there's a little fire, they'll blow air on it and make the fire even bigger. And they'll make the confrontation or the conflagration in society bigger. They'll make it bigger by agitating, and they will go to the rebellion, go to the strike, go to the protest, and they will engage in agitation. And they will stir people up to engage in greater confrontation. And they will try to direct this spontaneous uprising away from supporting the old power structure and away from just kind of fading out, and they'll try to blow it up into a confrontation with the system. That what generally happens when there's a spontaneous uprising in society is that it will generally get usurped by sections of the power structure, and that energy from the spontaneous rebellion will get pushed into supporting one figure or another within the old order. And the job of the Bolsheviks was to go where some kind of rebellion took place, go to where the confrontation was happening, and blow it up bigger and direct it against the entire system, not in support of one figure or another within the old power structure, not with agitation. And while they were engaging in agitation and making these confrontations bigger, they should also be picking out the most advanced, the people that were the most effective organizers and leaders of these protests and rebellions, picking out the most advanced and propagating to them. So you agitate to the masses to make confrontations bigger, and you propagate to the advanced, to the people that are the leaders of the masses, the people leading the strikes, the people leading the protests. You find them, and when you meet them, you teach them communism. You teach them Marxism. You propagate to them. You agitate to the masses, right? Texas abortion law, right? You agitate to the masses, and you propagate to the advanced. That was the Bolshevik method, and that the Bolshevik Party would engage in democratic centralism. In order to make a decision as a group, there would be a broad discussion in the group, but once through the democratic process they had determined what they were going to do, then it was the obligation of every member to carry it out, whether you agreed or not. And this is something that a lot of activist groups have struggled with. There's a disagreement in the group about what to do. Not everyone agrees. So after a decision is reached, they vote, we're going to do this. Well, the people who voted to do it, they do it. And the people who voted no, they say, well, okay, well, the group can do this, but I'm not doing it. The idea was, no, they needed to function more like an army. They need to have more military-style organizing. So after the group decides we're going to march down the street, they might take a vote, and 75% march down the street, but the vote is, 25% no, 75% yes. However, if they decide they're going to march down the street, 100% has to march down the street. That's, all right, wrote it down, writing the next one, right? And that's the idea. That is the idea. Right? That if the whole group decides we're going to march down the street, we all march. Every member is obligated to carry out the decisions. And the idea for the Party of New Type was that it was a method to get all these very effective, well-known revolutionary organizers in Russia, Bukharin, Zinoviev, Trotsky, Stalin, all of them into one organization, combining their efforts so it would be more effective. That was the idea. And at this meeting in London, Lenin pitched his idea for a Party of New Type. And he said, if we're going to win, we need to combine our efforts, and we need to form a central committee. And all of you can be part of the central committee. And we'll be the central committee of this Bolshevik Party. And that way we'll combine all of our efforts. When we decide we're going to do something, we'll all do it. We'll all throw all of our energy into it. And that can be how we ultimately set up and achieve a socialist revolution. That was the idea of the Party of New Type. And the majority of the people in the room voted to join it. And the minority of the people in the room voted not to join it. The majority of the people in the room, they became the Bolsheviks. That's the majority group. That's what Bolshevik means. It means majority group. The people in the room who didn't decide to join it, they became the minority group, and they became the Mensheviks, and they remained the party of the old type. And Trotsky voted against it, but Trotsky had the idea that he was going to go halfway. Trotsky's idea was that he was going to form something called the August Bloc, and he was going to get the Bolsheviks to stay in the same party as the Mensheviks, but form a more radical faction, the August Bloc. And Lenin said no. He said, we're going to have to form our own organization. If we're going to function in a disciplined manner, if we're going to move toward actually taking power, we got to break it off with the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party. We have to form our own organization. We need to have one newspaper to represent our views. We need to have one face to the masses. Even if we disagree internally, we have to have one message that goes out to the masses. So no, we're not going to. We're not going to do that. We're not going to join the Mensheviks and be the radical faction within this old organization. We're going to form our new group. Well, Trotsky tried to form the August Bloc, and the August Bloc failed miserably. Nobody showed up. It was a complete and utter failure. Trotsky, for a while, he had his own grouping within the Mensheviks, and then he had his own whatever. And Trotsky, he moved on. He had his own little following, around Trotsky, but it didn't work out. So it was that understanding that you needed to form a party of a new type, of people who gave the whole of their lives to be the tribune of the people, a vanguard party, a party of new type, this new, more effective way of organizing. That is what Lenin's brilliance was. And this party of new type that he formed, this vanguard party that he created, it was very difficult to keep it together. And when I talk about Lenin being nervous and stressed out, a lot of what he was doing was trying to keep this organization of all kinds of people who did not agree with each other, had vehemently different personal views, political views, was trying to keep them all in the same group. Trying to keep them all in the same organization, trying to keep them in his party of new type. That is what Lenin was known for. Lenin was not a mass organizer as much as he was an organizer's organizer. He organized organizers. He agitated agitators. He corralled revolutionaries together. That's what he did, and it caused him a huge amount of stress, and he built an organization in which all these great revolutionary thinkers and organizers in Russia could coordinate their activities. And that's what you need to understand about Vladimir Lenin. That's Lenin, okay? That is who Vladimir Lenin was. And, the mausoleum that was built after Lenin died, that served a political purpose. The cult of Lenin, Leninism, that all served a political purpose because the Soviet Union had been a feudal society. The Russian Empire had been one of the most conservative and traditional societies in history. And after the overthrow of the Tsar, you had a deeply conservative population, but you also had the radical left-wing ideas of the Bolshevik leaders, and there was a contradiction there. And so by putting Lenin in a mausoleum, right, by putting his face everywhere, this was something people could understand. It mimicked a lot of the Russian Orthodox traditions. In the Russian Orthodox Church, it was believed that the body of saints, the way to determine if someone was a saint, was if their body did not decompose at the same rate that other people's bodies decompose. So putting Lenin in the mausoleum, preserving his body and putting it on display was kind of a subtle way. They didn't directly say it, but it was kind of a subtle way of saying that Lenin is a saint and putting Lenin's face everywhere, right? And having an image of Lenin where he almost practically has a halo on his head. I mean, not exactly. I mean, it was a mimicking of some of the Russian Orthodox traditions. Lenin became the iconic figure of the new Soviet society. And that's it was necessary to do. And so the understanding of the Bolshevik Party as Lenin's little cult and all that was necessary. It served a political purpose. But the thing is that in reality, if you look at the history of the Bolshevik Party, Lenin was constantly getting outvoted. Did you know this? Many times, Lenin would want the Bolsheviks to do something, and the rest of the Central Committee, Bukharin, Zinoviev, Kamenev, Litvinov, Stalin, would vote no. Many times, many times, Lenin would be furious. He was always fighting with the rest of his Central Committee. Always. I mean, you read the letters. You can get the complete works of Lenin. They have this big Read the letters section. He is constantly angry, yelling at them. He threatens to quit at numerous times. He said, "I will resign from this party." They were fighting with each other up and down and backwards and forwards, and Lenin often did not get his way. Many times, Vladimir Lenin, the guy who thought of the whole thing, the guy who created the whole group, got outvoted. So this notion that Lenin, that it was a cult around Lenin, that it was Lenin's great personality, this cult of personality centered around the great Vladimir Lenin, that's historical fiction, right? It's a fiction that made sense. It made sense. Made a lot of sense. But it wasn't true, right? And that who Lenin was is quite interesting. So then that gets us to Stalin. Who is Stalin? Right? And Stalin is another case of, like, if you go to the library, you go to not the library really, but if you go to Barnes and Noble, you will find all kinds of books about Stalin that are, I mean, it's just so ridiculous. It'll be little anecdotes that people said. You'll just get this image of this monstrous, brutal tyrant who ate little babies for dinner and had blood dripping down his throat and had vampire teeth. And, I mean, you'll get this over-the-top caricature. And the sad thing about, if you ever read anything about Stalin, okay, I'm not going to get into, what happened when Stalin was the leader of the Bolsheviks. I'm not even going there. But it's like Stalin was wildly popular when he was running the Soviet Union. And still to this day, he's very, very popular in Russia, number one. And number two, he was very, very effective as a political organizer before the Bolsheviks took power. He was a very, very, very effective political organizer. So if there was nothing good that he ever did, if he was just this caricature of evil, who just sat around and was evil all day long, and how can I kill more people today? If that's who he was, why do people still love him? Why was he able to get so many people to follow him? Why was he, why was he so effective in organizing and building the Bolshevik Party before the revolution? I mean, this was a guy who obviously had a lot going for him. And you know what drives me crazy? What drives me absolutely crazy? I'll just say this, is that what I just said about Stalin, that, okay, put aside, we're not going to argue about Holodomor and gulags. I'm not even going to go there. I'm not interested in talking about that. Right now we're talking about personalities, okay? Right? So let's just put aside. I'm not going to engage in the historical debate of I'm not doing that, right? We can agree that a lot of people were in gulags who didn't belong there. We can agree there were some pretty bad famines that happened because the country was barricaded and because they were struggling to industrialize and collectivization. So I'm not even gonna have that argument here. Put all of that aside, right? I'm sitting here telling you that Stalin, in order to do what Stalin did, in order to industrialize the USSR, in order to defeat the Nazis, in order to build the Bolshevik Party as effectively as he did, he must have been very charismatic and very skilled. That's something that if you're an honest person, you could be the most extreme anti-communist ever. You can hate everything that Stalin stood for. You have to admit, the guy was quite competent on some level. And people are happy to say this about Hitler. Did you notice that? If you said that about Hitler, you would be the History Channel. You could be the History Channel and say that about Hitler. We all know that Hitler killed millions of people in gas chambers, that Hitler was a mass-murdering, racist, fascist who started a war that killed hundreds of millions of people. Hitler was evil. But if you get there and you say, well, Hitler was a very good speaker and he knew how to... Everyone's like, yeah, that's okay. But if you say anything good about Stalin, if you say anything good about Mao or Fidel Castro or Kim Il-sung, it's like, oh my God, you're defending... And it's like, even if you hate them, even if you don't recognize them ever doing something good, you have to admit that in order for them to accomplish what they accomplished, they must have had some skills. They must have been somewhat charismatic. They must have been somewhat effective in their work, but you can't do that. And you can do it with Hitler. For some reason, you can do that with Hitler. There's no, if you say Hitler, oh, well, he was a good speaker. Oh, he knew how to give good speeches. He knew how to organize. Everyone's like, yeah, that's fine. That's the History Channel. That's, college history classes. Hitler is, we're going to read every biography and every book. And, But with Stalin, if you get anything other than mass murdering, baby eating butcher, and same with Mao, anything but evil, satanic, blood drinking. I mean, it's weird. It's, Harpal Brar, who I've interviewed before, communist writer in Britain. I interviewed him, and in one of his speeches, I remember he said that when the bourgeoisie talk about communism, they stop sounding historical, and they start sounding hysterical. And it's totally true. And as weird as it is, Hitler is widely hated. The majority of the human race recognizes how horrendous the Holocaust was and how horrendous Hitler's crimes were. So we all know how evil, Hitler was. But for some reason, we're allowed to acknowledge that in order for Hitler to do all the evil things he did, he must have been effective in some ways, but not with communists. You can't acknowledge that with communists. With communists, oh, no, they're pure satanic evil. And if you say anything, oh my God, it's the weirdest thing. It is the weirdest thing. I remember sitting there in school, the way they described communism, it's idiotic, it's stupid, only an idiot would believe in communism. They want to divide up everything actually absolutely equally, and everyone gets paid the same wage. That's retarded. They don't believe in God. Communism is pure stupidity, pure idiocy. But fascism, it's like, well, Hitler was a very good speaker and he made the trains run on time. It's like fascism is an understandable mistake. And communism, you just have to be an idiot. I mean, U.S. society is really, really slanted to the right. It's really, really slanted to the right. I mean, if you don't think there's a right-wing bias in U.S. society, I'm sorry. I mean, it is utterly ridiculous. Fascism and Nazism are, that's an understandable mistake. And communism is, you have to be an idiot to believe in and it's like, no, and again, there's not intellectual honesty here. I'm not a fascist, but I understand the appeal of fascism. I understand the arguments that fascists made. I understand what they believe. I understand the effectiveness that fascists built their organizations with. Because I'm honest, I can admit that, look, there was a reason that the fascists were able to take power. In order to actually understand things, you have to be honest, right? You have to put aside your bias and understand things. I think fascism is abominable. I hate fascism. I'm appalled by fascism, but I understand it, right? With communism in the United States, you're not allowed to understand it. Communists are just these stupid people who think that everyone should get paid the exact same wage no matter how hard they work, and human nature, duh. And it's like the way people talk about communism is so, you look at the 20th century. How many millions of people fought and died for communism? How many people, intellectuals, Albert Einstein, John Stein, all these people believed in communism, but they're all just fucking idiots. They're all just not smart enough to watch Jordan Peterson videos. Are you kidding me? There's a lack of intellectual honesty. So I just want to throw that out there, right? Try to cancel me all you want, but I'm telling you, with Stalin, right? Stalin was obviously somebody, like him or hate him, who knew what he was doing, right? He was a very, very effective organizer. So I'm going to tell you about Stalin and his personality. Stalin, he was not Russian. Did you know that? Everyone thinks Stalin was Russian. He was not Russian. Stalin was from Georgia. And no, I do not mean Georgia in the southern United States. He was not from Atlanta. He was not from that state right next to Alabama and right above Florida. No. Stalin was from Central Asia. He was from Georgia. He was born in Georgia. Stalin's understanding of minorities, himself being Georgian. Writing it down. Stalin. Right? He was from Georgia, Central Asian, Caucasus regions. And Stalin's mother has one of the biggest personalities that you can ever read about. Stalin's mother is, and by the way, one of the best biographies I've ever read of Stalin is called Young Stalin. And it's by Simon Sebag Montefiore. It's called Young Stalin. And it's, again, Simon Sebag Montefiore is so right-wing and so conservative. He's from the British aristocracy. He went to one of these elite British private schools, Eton or whatever. And so because he's so conservative and he's so wealthy and all of that, they let him write a book that's kind of admits Stalin's effectiveness. And, Stalin, he's from a little village in Georgia. I think it's called Gori. He's a little village called Gori. And his mother, Stalin's mother, has a really strong personality. She's somebody who can do anything, practically, if she sets her heart on it. She can make anything happen, right? He's from a very poor family, but Stalin's mother is just this very forceful person who can just get things done. And there are different perceptions about why. One popular story, which again we cannot confirm, is that she had many miscarriages before Stalin was born. So she made a promise to God. She said, if you can let me give birth to a son, I will make him become a priest. That's one version. That's not confirmed. For whatever reason, Stalin, which was not his name, right? Yosef Yugashvili, right? His mother was determined for him to become a priest. And so, even though he's from this tiny little village, even though, his father's a bootmaker and an alcoholic, Stalin's mother goes around raising money to get Stalin to go to seminary school to become a priest. And so she does it. And that in and of itself, people have talked about how that is like next to impossible at that time. For a little town in Georgia, an impoverished person whose father is a drunken bootmaker, a drunken guy who makes boots, and it is like next to impossible for somebody from a little tiny town in Georgia to go to seminary school and become a priest. So Stalin's mother somehow going around and raising the money to get Stalin into seminary school is kind of amazing. It is like, it's huge. And that shows how kind of fanatical his mother was. And his mother lived well into the time when he was leading the country. And I know Stalin at one point banned any interviews with his mother because she was spending a lot of time doing interviews for newspapers and in the media. And Stalin was sick of hearing his mother talk on the radio and stuff. And he actually banned her from speaking in the media, which is kind of funny. Stalin's mother had this big personality, very religious woman. And she determined that Stalin should become a priest. So she somehow got him to go to seminary school. She got the money together to fund Stalin going to seminary school. And so Stalin went to seminary school, right? And at the seminary school, Stalin was apparently one of the worst behaved students they had ever had. He was constantly getting into mischief, constantly getting into trouble, constantly breaking the rules. Stalin was apparently a horrendous student at seminary school. He was constantly getting in trouble, constantly breaking the rules. He was like a juvenile delinquent, at seminary school. One of the things, and this is fascinating, they had a rule at this seminary school that Stalin was at, that you could only read religious books. You can only read religious books. So Stalin went to the local village, and he got a subscription. You could do that at the bookstore in this village. He got a subscription. So they would send him every single book they got. And he then made money selling those books secretly to all the other boys in the seminary school. He had an underground book smuggling conspiracy. He ran a book smuggling ring at the seminary school, right? And they weren't communist books from what I understand. That's been romanticized later, but they weren't communist books from what we understand. They were just, stuff like Victor Hugo and, just novels and stuff. But he was getting punished, and he was making money doing it, right? It was kind of his little hustle, as Girard says. That was Stalin. And he's constantly getting in trouble. Not a very good student. He's getting low grades. Right? He doesn't get very good grades. He's not very focused, but he does learn to read and write. And that puts him ahead of a lot of people in Russian society at that time. In the Russian Empire, we're talking the Russian Empire in the 1890s, 1900, that puts you pretty far ahead of a lot of people if you can read and write. So finally, his mother just stops paying the bills. She's like, I worked so hard to send you to priest, to learn to become a priest. Worked so hard to do this, and you're screwing around and you're breaking the rules. Screw you, and his mother stops paying the bills. So Stalin goes to the nearby village, the village near where, his seminary school is. And there he joined the Bolsheviks, and he became an organizer of industrial workers, of factory workers, of union. He becomes a union organizer after he's kicked out of the village. But there's another aspect of this too, which is that Stalin's mother and father were not together. That Stalin's father wanted him to be a bootmaker, like he was, not a priest. And so frequently, throughout Stalin's childhood and teen years, his father would kidnap him. Right? I mean, this is one of the saddest things. So his mother wants him to go to priest school, maybe because she made a promise to God, or maybe not, we don't know. His father, who's an alcoholic, wants him to become a bootmaker. And so frequently, Stalin will, go home to visit his family or whatever. And from what we understand, the father would show up and take Stalin away with him and start teaching him to be a bootmaker. And then the mother would go back to, wherever the father was and say, no, Stalin's coming with me, and have him become a priest at seminary school. You want to talk about a confused upbringing, right? Your mother is, moving heaven and earth to get the money together to send you to school, seminary school, to be a priest. Your father, on the other hand, keeps showing up, kidnapping you and taking you, and basically taking you against your will back to his home somewhere else to try and get you to become a shoe or a bootmaker. Do you imagine how confusing that would be for a young man? I mean, the parents were not together. They were not living together, right? The parents had split apart. So, and Stalin's mother, and again, you want to talk about the force of Stalin's mother. Stalin's mother, the more you read about Stalin's mother, the more you read that she's this this person, right? I mean, this is not a society where women are encouraged to take on leadership roles or her ex-husband is showing up and taking her son away, and then she's showing up and taking her son back from the ex-husband and sending him back to seminary school. This is like, again, you want to talk about an interesting thing, but the thing is that everywhere Stalin goes, and this goes right up to the time of his death, Stalin is very much a man's man, right? Stalin is very much an organizer. Stalin is very much he is popular everywhere he goes. In seminary school, right? He's running this underground book smuggling club. And, he may not be getting good grades, and he may be the class clown, and he may be always in trouble and all that, but he's popular. All the other kids think he's the coolest guy around. And that's one thing that Stalin kind of has going for him. Wherever he goes, people love him. Later when he's a revolutionary organizer, he goes to prison. And the other Bolsheviks are in the prison, and they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? And Stalin makes friends with the other prison inmates. And he's really popular in the jail. And the other prisoners, they think he's really badass, and they think he's really cool. And that Stalin has a way of just kind of getting people to like him, right? He's charming. And he can tell jokes, and he just knows how to get along with people. He's the kind of person that people like, right? He's a very charming, charismatic individual. And when he's in the jail, right? A lot of these Bolshevik organizers are intellectuals. They're from a wealthy background. You put them in a jail cell with robbers and criminals and murderers, and they're sitting there, oh my God, this is terrifying. Stalin, somehow, all the other prison inmates like Stalin. This happens over and over again. Later, in Stalin, in his revolutionary years, he's deported, right? This is a thing they used to do to criminals and revolutionaries in Russia, is they deport you to Siberia, right? In order to get you, all right? Hitler, Mussolini. In order to get you to not be a threat to the status quo, not be a threat to the government, in Russia, they would, deport you to Siberia. So they deport Stalin and Lenin, Bukharin, a lot of these great revolutionary leaders, they deport them to Siberia. So they're in Siberia, right? Little, Siberia. Look at a map. Look how big Siberia is, right? It's a big, vast amount of territory, but not a lot of people there. It's very spread out, and they talk about how a lot of these revolutionaries are sitting there. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, Stalin, he goes to the local village. He makes friends, with some of the local villagers, and he's so popular that they elect him the president of the hunting club. Stalin could get along with anybody. Prison, workers, factory workers, seminary school. You send him out to Siberia in the middle of a village. Stalin in the Siberian village, he makes friends with all the local Siberians. They like him so much, they make him the president of the hunting club, right? Stalin, and he likes to drink, right? He likes to drink. He likes to, he's a manly man, kind of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he had a deformed foot. One of his feet were deformed, if I'm not mistaken. But Stalin knew how to charm people. That's really who Stalin was. He was a man's man. He was an organizer. He was a popular guy. And a lot of people don't know this, but, right, in Lenin's book, What Is to Be Done, he pitches the idea of an all-Russian socialist newspaper. It's called Iskra, which means spark. Iskra was not widely read. The Iskra newspaper, the Bolsheviks, it was an ideological paper for people that were already in the Bolshevik Party. However, there was another newspaper that was very widely read, that everybody read. It was all over the Russian cities. It was called Pravda. It means truth. The Truth. It was a newspaper called The Truth, Pravda. After the Russian Revolution, it became the official government newspaper. But before the revolution, Pravda was this daily agitational newspaper that the Bolsheviks distributed throughout St. Petersburg. And it was this daily newspaper, Truth. And Stalin was the editor of Pravda. Not Iskra, not the ideological, theoretical journal. He was the editor of Pravda, of Truth. And a lot of what was in Pravda was what they called worker correspondence, letters to the editor. And it was just people complaining about their conditions. And it was anonymous. A lot of it was anonymous. Anonymous letters from people. Hey, at my factory, they're making us work this long. It's bullshit. I don't like it. Thank you, John. Hey, at my factory, they just got this new machine and it doesn't work. And it was just people, average people, often not signing it with their real name because they didn't want to lose their job and they didn't want to get in trouble. It was average people, writing letters, and that was most of what Pravda was. It was worker correspondence. And Stalin was the editor of Pravda, of the daily newspaper that people could read. It was this daily newspaper that agitated. It was the agitational newspaper. Iskra was the ideological paper. It was the propaganda newspaper. But Pravda was the agitational newspaper that just kind of stirred people up to a greater confrontation with the bourgeoisie. And Stalin was the editor of that, along with Kamenev. So, Stalin, the more you look at Stalin, the more you see this is kind of a man's man. This is kind of a mass organizer. This is a popular guy. A lot of testosterone there. Definitely, definitely a bro, you know what I mean? But this is a guy who knew how to get along with people. He could tell jokes. He could tell stories. And he just was very, very charming. And that's how Stalin was able to do what he did, right? That's how he was able to do what he did. And put all of your thoughts about what happened when he was leading Russia aside. This is who he was, right? I just told you about how Lenin, was the very nervous person, the very nervous guy, and all of that. Well, now I'm telling you who Stalin was, right? And again, if you want to understand Stalin and the role he played in history, you have to understand the personality there. Now, one of the best stories I ever heard about Stalin, and again, if you go to Barnes & Noble, you'll find a million biographies. They're all full of unverified stories of him doing monstrous atrocities. But one of the best stories I ever heard about Stalin, which people say checks out, most likely probably did happen, right? It's not just a rumor, it's not just something, is that supposedly one day when Stalin was leader of the Soviet Union, he was walking with his daughter, right? And his daughter saw a propaganda poster with him on it. And his daughter said, "Oh my God, Daddy, are you Stalin?" And Stalin said to his daughter, supposedly, right? This probably happened. This is not, doesn't fit the horror story. This is, something that most likely happened. Stalin said to his daughter, he said, no, that's Stalin. That's Stalin. I'm your father. Meaning that Stalin himself knew that the propaganda, and that's true. I mean, as much as I'm critical of the books that we all get spoon-fed about Stalin, where he comes across as this atrocious monster, the Soviet biographies of Stalin are junk. I mean, they're just so, sappy propaganda. The cult of personality around Stalin. The cult of personality around him wasn't very honest, right? That he was presented as this, superhuman, infallible, godlike father figure for the nation or something. It wasn't really who he was. And he knew that. And that story, that anecdote where he says to his daughter, he says, "Oh, no, that's Stalin, I'm your father." It's sweet, right? I mean, and it shows you that on some level, again, just like the cult of personality around Lenin, the image you get of Lenin is very different than who Lenin really was. The image that we get of Stalin, that the Soviet government made of Stalin, was very different than who he really was. And the image that we're now presented with Stalin, where, and we're presented with the image of Stalin as being Satan, Satan incarnate, that's not very accurate either. Right? Alibaba donates a third of its cash to People's Initiative. All right. Thank you for the super chat. Alibaba, cash, People's Initiative. There you go. So that brings me to the third person that we're going to talk about here. And that'll be the last personality that we talk about here. And that's Mao. Mao Zedong, leader of the Chinese Revolution. Mao is not Lenin, and Mao is not Stalin, though I think you could argue that there are some similarities to Mao, to Stalin and Mao. There are similarities in their personality. That's the third thing we've gotten on the abortion thing. That's okay, writing it down. Fascist inroads on abortion. But that's okay, I'm writing them down. Mao was, the more you read about Mao, the more you realize that more than anything, Mao was very much like he knew teenagers, right? Mao understood teenagers in China. And that comes across if you read Red Star over China. That comes across in the interviews that Mao gave throughout his life. That comes across in Mao's own writings, is that Mao, he had been a principal at a high school. He had been a teacher at one point. And that Mao very much knew how to talk to adolescents. And that China, you talk about filial piety. You talk about the family structure in China and Confucianism, that there was, to be a teenager in China in the 1920s and 30s, all right, Veritas, leftist teacher, to be a teenager in China in the 1930s is very different than being a teenager in the United States in our time. Very, very different. The obligations, the expectations that one has, the amount of submission and obedience that is expected from individuals, very, very different. Not something that a lot of us can relate to. But the very first article that Mao ever published was about the importance of physical education, right? And about the fact that, in Chinese schools, there is this tradition of exercising together. And that's, and that Mao is saying that, joint exercises for students are a very important thing to do. It's a very important tradition. And I think he's not even a communist at the time that he writes this piece. He's not even a communist, but he still, he's talking about the importance of exercising together. And that, when Mao speaks about his father, and actually, in the We Are City Builders textbook, the very last section that I included is probably my favorite piece by Mao, and it's called "Talk on the Question of Philosophy," and it's Mao. It's one of the rare examples of Mao off script. It's not a formal presentation. It's not him presenting the party line. It is a transcript of Mao speaking to a group of university students, 1964, when Mao was pretty old. And he's just talking to a group of university students about philosophy, about dialectical materialism, about how knowledge comes from correct practical experience. He starts out by urging them all to go to the countryside. And Mao comes across as kind of a charming teacher in a lot of ways. You can see that. And, there's a book called The Long Revolution by Edgar Snow, and it's got Mao's last interview in it. Before Edgar Snow died and before Mao died, Edgar Snow went to China and he interviewed the very elderly Mao. And Edgar Snow asks Mao, he says, he asks him about the personality cult. At that point, there were like 5 nicknames for Mao: the great helmsman, the great revolutionary leader, the great teacher, the great organizer, And so Mao said, I reject all of those labels except for the great teacher. That's what I want to be known as, is the great teacher. And in a lot of ways, throughout Mao's entire life, he was a teacher, right? I mean, he was a high school principal. He was a teacher before that. He was a librarian. And a lot of what Mao was a teacher. And he knew how to relate to people in their teen years, the feelings of rebellion that teenagers have, the feelings of resentment, which again, very different in the context of China and filial piety and the traditions. And that Mao is also, he's a rural guy. He's a rural guy. Mao is from the countryside. He's from a wealthier family in the countryside, not a poor family, right? He's from a more middle-class family that had servants and owned land and such, but he's not from the cities. He goes to the cities. He goes to the cities to study. His family financially supports him. He goes to university. He actually studied at Yale for a little bit. I bet you didn't know that, but Yale University had a China-affiliated program, and the young Mao attended Yale China, which I think is hilarious, right? He was a Yale guy. Mao is a Yale guy. He attended Yale China, Yale's China program in the early 19 teens and 20s. They had a Yale program. So Mao is connected to one of our great Ivy League institutions in Stamford, Connecticut. He went to study at the university. He's from the countryside. And one thing that Mao talks about extensively, if you read this essay that I included here, Mao's talk on philosophy. If you read Red Star Over China and Mao and his talks about, his talk with Edgar Snow, where he's telling Edgar Snow his life story, Mao had daddy issues. Mao did not get along with his father. Mao and his father did not like each other. That comes across. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal, right? And, again, nowadays, for some celebrity to be like, I had issues with my dad. I think Michael Jackson would always talk about his father. He didn't like his. That's normal. Not normal in China in the 1920s and 50s and 60s. I'll even read you one thing. This is in this talk on philosophy by Mao. He's talking, he's talking about his own father. He said, this is what Mao says. This is elderly Mao is speaking to a group of university students. He says, my father took the view that if a man did not look after himself, heaven and earth would punish him. My mother opposed him. When my father died, very few people followed the funeral procession. When my mother died, a great many people followed the funeral procession. One time, the Cao Liu robbed our family. I said they were right to do so, for they had nothing. But even my mother could not accept this at all. He's basically saying that his father was a selfish asshole. It's like, and this guy is, he's in his 70s and he's speaking to a group of students, and just, of all the things to say to a group of college students, 1964, Mao is giving a lecture on philosophy to a group of college students. And he just says, hey, my father took the view that if man didn't look after himself, heaven and earth would punish him. My mother opposed him, but when he died, very few people followed the funeral procession. He's basically calling his father a selfish asshole. Yeah, and if you read Red Star Over China by Edgar Snow, if you read Red Star Over China, he talks about, the beatings, that his father, and how his father would beat both him and his sisters and his mother all the time, and how he developed the concept of the united front, by, strategizing with his mother and with his sisters about how to stop the father from beating them. Jesus Christ. The more you read about Mao's father, the more he comes across as just some kind of very brutal and cruel person, just very abusive, very violent. And it's interesting that, that Mao speaks of his father in such derogatory terms, number one. That's very interesting. And number two, it's also very interesting that Mao grows up to be a teacher and kind of a mentor to teenagers, and that Mao's political career is largely about, inciting and adolescent rebellion is a big part of who Mao became politically. If you look at in the 1930s when he was building the Red Army, the Red Army was largely, the appeal was, it was teenagers, right? Hey, leave your parents, leave your house, come join the revolution, come join the revolutionary movement. And largely the Red Army, the People's Liberation Army, the Eighth Route Army, is largely teenagers who run away from home to join their new family, to join the party and fight for a new China. And it's largely teenagers who run away and join his revolutionary army. And then later in the 60s, the Cultural Revolution, we all know about the Cultural Revolution, that was Mao calling on the teenagers of China, the Red Guards, to overthrow the Communist Party. He feels that the party is revisionist, so he's telling all the teenagers, go out and bombard the headquarters. It is right to rebel against reactionaries. And the Cultural Revolution, in a lot of ways, is mobilizing teenagers, young teenagers, and very young people to rebel against their parents, to rebel against their teachers, to rebel against society. So the fact that Mao has these issues with his father, the fact that Mao very much, spends his life, being kind of a mentor to teenagers, but also kind of inciting teenage rebellion and kind of playing off teenage sentiment. That's fascinating, right? That really tells you a lot about who Mao was. Mao saw himself as a teacher and a mentor, and he also was very good at inciting feelings of anger and rebellion from young teenagers. That's fascinating. That's who Mao Zedong was. Another interesting thing about Mao Zedong is that Mao was obsessed with peasant rebellions. About 30 years before Mao was born, there was an event in China they called the Taiping Uprising. And it had a huge impact on Mao's life. You can believe it, right? There was an uprising among the peasantry in China. It was this guy who claimed he was Jesus's younger brother, and he led a peasant uprising to build God's heavenly kingdom on earth or whatever against the emperor. And, millions of Chinese people died. It was a civil war between this, peasant utopian Christian socialist uprising and the Chinese government. Mao built a monument to the Taiping Uprising in Tiananmen Square when he came to power. And Mao, you can bet that of all the political influences on Mao Zedong, the Taiping Uprising, that peasant rebellion that happened, about 30 years before he was born, that was a huge thing. And the fact that Mao says that when the peasant, when these peasant bandits robbed his family, he supported them. That's huge. That's huge, right? That is huge. And that tells you a lot about who Mao was. Now, before Mao was a communist, he was a follower of Peter Kropotkin, the anarchist. He had his organization called the New People's Study Society. And Mao was a follower of the Kropotkinist anarchist. He was a bread tuber. Mao was a bread tuber, basically. Did you know that? Mao was a bread tuber. He was a follower of Kropotkin, the guy who wrote, The Conquest of Bread, the Bread Book. So in a way, Mao is a very interesting case. Very interesting case. Mao is fascinating. Mao is very fascinating. So again, the more you investigate these people, the more you learn about who they actually were and what were their motivations. Why did they do what they can do, right? I mean, I hope I'm giving you, I've tried in my studies to get an image in my mind of like, if I ever met Mao, what would he have been like? If I ever met Stalin, what would he have been like? What would Lenin have been like if I met him? Well, like I told you, Lenin would have been a very nervous guy, spoke with a lisp, but got very worked up, played the piano. Stalin would have been some kind of man's man who was very charming and could get along with anyone, could have a conversation with anyone, and knew, you think about, Mao. Mao was some guy who knew how to kind of mentor teenagers, could tap into the feelings of teenagers, was very educated, also had, clearly had some daddy issues and some trauma and some rage, and, all very interesting. All very, very interesting. And there's other historical figures. I see Ramiro in the chat, good friend of the program, talking about Che Guevara, right? And Hugo Chavez is a fascinating figure, right? And I mean, I've studied a lot of the great American communist leaders like Eugene Debs and William Z. Foster and Huey Newton, and Fred Hampton. And this is all very interesting, When I was in university, I studied political science. I studied political science, poli-sci. Well, now I've discovered that I learn the most from studying economics and studying psychology, right? Politics is a good base, right? If you're interested in politics, you should obviously study politics, but that just kind of lays the foundation. But beyond politics is economics and psychology. And both of those things are very, very important. If you don't understand economics and you don't understand psychology, your political understanding is going to be very, very limited. So on that note, folks, I'm going to start answering your super chat questions. Before I do that, we can do our roll call. Roll call, roll call, roll call, roll call, roll call, roll call. Names and locations, I'll call you out as I see you. Who's with us today? Names and locations. Who is with us? Alan in Chicago is with us. Chaya in Montreal, good friend of the program. Isan from Iran is with us. Ryan in Oakland. Elias from Wisconsin. President Jesus from Los Angeles. Enoch from Australia. Jeff from Toronto, Holly from Queens, great. Kieran from San Diego, Auckland, New Zealand, Ben in Suffolk County, Covington, Kentucky, Inundation, Florida, Springfield, Missouri, Robert from Hawaii, Kinky in Joshua Tree, good friend of the show, David in Portugal, Lisbon, Toronto, Canada, RB from Vermont, Arturo from Alaska, Scotland, Northeast United States, Idaho, Cincinnati, Ohio, Kate Troy in Kansas City, Missouri, Mindanao to Midwest, Olympia Logic, good friend of the program, Balthazar in Oakland, Joe Gale in Nassau County, New York, welcome, Wadap, Caleb, and comrades from Chicago, beautiful, JT24, Ramiro out in Los Angeles, Ben from Denver, Tristan from Frederick, Maryland, good friend of the show, Tristan, John in Tucson, Heavy Dukes, New York City, California, Nashville, Tennessee, Sweden, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Sam in Australia, Pomona, California, Alan in Utah, Alabama, Mohsen from Iran, Bonnie Bridge, Scotland, Ghani, Texas, Deborah Wilson. Welcome, Deborah. So glad you're here. Wow. Austin, Texas, Quinn and Meredith in Eatonville, Washington. Quinn and Meredith, I think I'm going to make you mods, because you're on here so much. Fort Lauderdale, Helen in Melbourne, shout out to you. Andy Finaro, shout out to you, Andy. Vallejo, Jason Sarna, welcome, Jason, where you been? Send me an email sometime, man. Good to hear from you. John White in Houston. Nate in Chicago. Paz de Mundo in Philippines. Love your analysis, Caleb. Thank you, Helen. Thank you. I'm always happy to do that. Hipasha Muse, so good meeting Ramiro. Ramiro is awesome. He's really great. You should check out Ramiro's work on Nicaragua. So great. It's been an honor to know Ramiro. I'll never forget the day I was at a party at the International Action Center. There was a reception around Venezuela, and I turned around and I was drinking some punch or some Diet Coke, and there, standing in the International Action Center, was a young college student named Ramiro Funes. Great guy. I'm so glad to know him. Micah in Las Vegas, Harold Sullivan in Naples, Florida, Cupertino, LA baby, Tobias from Germany, Holly, Corona, California, Rhode Island, Caracas, Venezuela, Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, China. Madonna says, hello, everyone. And Neil Fraser, I think you can be a mod. You're now a mod. Pineapples are ultra left. Madonna is great. Shout out to you, Madonna. All right, everybody. Be sure to share this, by the way. Be sure to share this. Be sure to promote this. Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit that notifications bell. I think people aren't getting notifications because it's very odd. The numbers, a lot of people watch this afterwards, but for some reason there's not as many people watching currently. Usually the numbers of people watching are better, but we're just going to keep going, folks. We're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep going, folks. Donald Trump, it's amazing. It's going to be awesome. We're just going to keep going. We're just going to keep going. Yeah, someone didn't get the notification. So whatever. YouTube is messing with us, and the stream goes up and the stream goes down, and we're here. We're not going anyplace. We're building an amazing community. So we're just going to keep going. So share this, please. Post this around. Try to evade the censors. And before I answer the questions, which are all written down here, and keep the questions rolling in, right? That's how long the show keeps going, as I keep answering questions. If you really want to help this community, help promote the Saxton Lectures. The Saxton Lectures are very important. Those presentations that I did in Saxton, Pennsylvania at the retreat. There's 4 of them that are already up. There's 4 more coming. Help us promote the Saxton Lectures. Help us promote the Saxton Lectures. So if you know a space where people are interested in Marxism and socialism, please promote the Saxton Lectures. We need your help to promote the Saxton Lectures. We have some different ideas about how to promote the Saxton Lectures, but it is the most clear and correct understanding of Marxism that you're going to find online. If you watch those presentations that I gave, those 4 presentations so far, there's nobody who explains Marxism the way I do. It is an understanding you won't get. I'm sorry, you turn on David Harvey, or you turn on some of these people on the internet, you watch Jabba the Vosh, you watch Skippy the Bear, they're not going to teach you what I teach you in those lectures. Those lectures are a lot of very important information, followed up by a lot of really great discussion. It's a unique understanding of Marxism. So if you want to help this community, you want to help build socialism, we need you. We need you to help promote the Saxton Lectures. So go, there's a playlist on this YouTube channel now of the Saxton Lectures. We need folks to watch those Saxton Lectures. So if you can help spread the news about the Saxton Lectures, get other people to watch the Saxton Lectures. They're not just on YouTube, mind you. They're on Rumble. They're on BitChute. They're on Odyssey. And we're in the process of setting up a website that they'll be hosted on. So there's a lot of different places that people can watch the Saxton Lectures, but we need the Saxton Lectures. We need more people to watch the Saxton Lectures. So if you can please do your part, I am urging you to help promote the Saxton Lectures. We are actually probably at some point going to do, we have a lot of ideas about how to promote the Saxton Lectures. We have a lot of ideas about how to do it. A lot of them. So if you want to help us, we're going to do a whole campaign to promote the Saxton Lectures. It's going to be awesome. And on top of that, stay tuned, because probably within the next week, the video from our conference in Santa Barbara, California, will go up on the web. And there were some great talks and speeches. Ramiro spoke. David Cedillo from San Antonio or San Angelo, Texas, gave a great presentation. There were a lot of great presentations made. So the video from the CPI West Coast Conference is going to be on the web. So stay tuned for that. It's going to be some great video. You're going to enjoy it. And that's going to be awesome. So a lot of good things happening. There's 4 more Saxton Lectures in the works, right? You've seen part 1 of the Saxton Lectures, but the second half of the Saxton Lectures is on its way. So there you go. A lot of things coming up, and some of the organizing that's going on. I mean, what these kids in Texas have done is just, it blows my mind how dedicated they are and how they're doing, water distributions and caring for people and feeding people that are hungry in their neighborhood. And every week they're having in Texas, the Texas local is having classes, on this manual, on the We Are City Builders textbook, educational manual. What they're doing out there is utterly amazing. And what the folks in Chicago are doing, what the folks in California, the California State Organizing Committee of the Center for Political Innovation is being formed. And they just had this amazing conference out there. Shout out, we got to meet, and they came and spoke at our conference, Pasta and Fiorella from Convo Couch. They came and they both gave great speeches at our conference. The Convo Couch, watch Convo Couch YouTube channel. Those folks are great. They're great. I like them. Very friendly people, very anti-imperialist. They understand we need to get past this cancel culture. They're amazing. We are building it. We're building it, right? We are building it, right? All these people, someone once told me, they said, if you're on the highway, and there's somebody in front of you going slow, do you just sit behind them honking your horn? No. You pull around and speed on ahead. That's what we're doing. The left, the socialist and communist groups, Jacobin and the ISO and the RCP and the QWH and the SWP and the XYZ and the QJW and all the alphabet soup of parties are failing. They are failing miserably. So with our meager resources and our meager efforts, we are going out and doing what needs to be done. We're not waiting for them to do it for us. We're on here preaching Marxism, giving classes on it. We're on here building communities of solidarity, and it's happening around the country. People are coming together around the message of we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action to fight for working families. Fusion City now. People are doing it. People are coming together. We're doing it, right? We're not waiting. We're not waiting for that car ahead of us to speed forward. We're not doing that. We're pulling around and speeding ahead. That's what we're doing. We did it in Santa Barbara. We did it in Saxton, Pennsylvania. Probably going to be in Texas pretty soon. Probably going to be in Chicago soon. They're having weekly classes out there in Chicago. It's amazing. We're just going to speed ahead because it needs to be done. And the amount of success that we have had so far is kind of shocking to me, right? I mean, it shocks me. I find it utterly shocking, the amount of success that we're having so far, because it doesn't make sense, right? Why is it that we are growing so rapidly? When these groups that have way more resources than we do, way more dedicated cadre, they've got people who've been working with them for years, but look, we're the new kids on the block. We're doing things a completely different way. And people like what they hear and they like what they see, and Americans are ready for socialism. So we are not stopping. We're moving ahead, and that's what we're doing. So now I'm going to answer your super chats. I am going to answer your super chats, so keep the super chats rolling in, because that's what we're going to do. First super chat, use value versus exchange value. Right? Well, we don't have production for use, we have production for profit, right? The price of items in capitalism is not based on how useful they are, but rather based on how available they are for sale. And the price of items, thank you Sharon Pitts for the super chat, the price of items fluctuates based on supply and demand, how available they are, etc. We don't have production for use, we have production for profit. And that is the nature of the capitalist system. And this is one point that's made by Peter Kropotkin and others, is they say when Marx talks about surplus value, right, and how the worker is not paid the true value of his labor, that's not exactly correct, he argues, because he says, how can you really prove how much something is worth? And there's an element of truth in that. I mean, it's like a spiritual question. How much is this book worth? How can you calculate the value of this book? Who knows, right? What you can calculate is the percentage of making it that, is acquired, is contributed. And this theory of surplus value that Marx makes, is based on the fact that, the percentage of the production costs that the worker puts in is not how much he's paid, right? In order for the capitalist to make a profit, he must steal, he must cut into the value the worker puts into it. Okay, but at the end of the day, how much value is anything worth, right? As was said by Chaya in the chat, this is like a moral critique. We don't really know, right? And so this is where Marx, again, he's not saying what is the value and like how much is this worth? How much is a life worth? It's not what he's getting at. Rather, what Marx is getting at is that the worker doesn't get paid the percentage of the price that they put into it. That's the point. Okay, of the final price, in order for profits to be made, the worker cannot be paid the full value of his work. That is the point that's being made. All right. I actually don't know enough about Salvador Allende's Cybersyn project. I was actually, the first time I've heard about it was today in a discussion in which I think it was the very person who asked this question brought it up. So I'm going to have to do research on it. I just don't know about it. I know about who Salvador Allende was, the socialist leader of Chile, who took power in an alliance with the communists, was overthrown in a brutal U.S.-backed coup in 1973, September 11th, 1973. That's who Salvador Allende was. But I was not aware of his Cybersyn project. I'm curious to hear about it, so there you go. All right. The Black Hammer Organization. The Black Hammer Organization. I don't want to create a drama. I'm not on here to get into a mudslinging fest. But I have been very unimpressed by a lot of their activities. I tend to be sympathetic to all black nationalism, right? I'm quoted in Final Newspaper. I have been a number of times. I went to Iran with leaders of the Nation of Islam, and I am sympathetic whenever black people are organizing themselves as a nation and viewing themselves as a colonized people and demanding, considering themselves to be a nation, Malcolm X, the Nation of Islam, Marcus Garvey, etc. I have a deep respect and admiration for black nationalism of all strands, cultural nationalism, Marxist and revolutionary nationalism like the Black Panthers, etc. So, part of me doesn't want to criticize any black nationalist organization because I feel like whenever black people are fighting for their rights, organizing their community, asserting their self-determination as a colonized people within U.S. borders, that they should be supported. So there's part of me that doesn't want to criticize them. That said, some of what Black Hammer has done, rubs me the wrong way. Okay? Burning the diary of Anne Frank, referring to Anne Frank, a victim of the Holocaust, as, quote, a Karen, trying to belittle the Holocaust. Not cool. Don't do that. The way that they kind of, some of the videos that they have, that kind of remind you of the aesthetics of the Joker and all that. Not a big fan of Black Hammer. I'll just be honest, right? But then again, I'm not supposed to be. I'm white, right? It's not a group for white guys. It's a black nationalist organization. That said, I'm not impressed with a lot of what they've done. I'll just be honest. I'm not impressed with a lot of what they've done. They're not trying to impress me, and that's that. But yeah, a lot of what they do kind of rubs me the wrong way. And I think kind of plays into this idea that the problem isn't capitalism. The problem is individual white people not understanding that they have white privilege. And that's not my perception. I think, yes, there is quote unquote white privilege that exists. My life would be far worse if I was not white, and every white person in the United States needs to admit that. And if you don't admit that, you're not being honest with yourself. Being white does give you, a benefit in a lot of ways. There's a lot of hardship that you will not experience that people of color have to experience every day. Now, if you deny that, if you pretend that's not real, you're not being honest with yourself. So white privilege certainly exists. I don't think the word privilege is the correct terminology, because privilege implies that what happens to black people should happen to everybody. But no one should be shot for reaching for their wallet. No one should not be hired for a job because of their skin color. And so rather than saying that what happens to white people is a privilege, it should be understood that what happens to black people is a violation of their rights. And so I would quibble about the terminology. But what people are referring to when they say white privilege exists is absolutely true. So I don't quibble about the concept that it exists, right? If you are white in the United States, you don't have to experience a lot of things that people of color have to experience that are very awful. And in terms of, your family's financial ability, you're going to be better off. In terms of the way employers, teachers view you, you're going to be better off. There is definitely, such things exist. But at the end of the day, the liberation of black people and the fight against racism benefits all working people. All working people benefit from the abolition of racism. Obviously those who benefit from it the most are the victims of racism. But racism hurts all workers. It hurts all workers by holding back the class struggle. And all the gains for white workers and in the United States have come when black workers' needs are put forward. When the Communist Party put anti-racism in control of the labor movement, that led to great victories, right? And when the labor unions were racist and they had whites-only policies, that hurt the entire working class. It was the Communist Party's understanding that racism hurt all workers that enabled the CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, to get over to push back against racism and bring black people into the labor movement, and that resulted in huge victories. There's many examples of this. Public education would not be available if it weren't for Reconstruction and the overturning of slavery and the Union Army, and there are many examples of how anti-racism benefits all workers in the United States, and racism hurts all workers. Obviously, the people it hurts the most are the black people who are the victims of racism, but all workers suffer because of racism. And the overturning of racism is good for all workers. And that's something that the ID poll left doesn't understand. The ID poll left makes it sound like racism is good for white people. Well, it's not. Right? It might put them in a situation where they're slightly better off, or not even slightly, but in some cases massively better off than black people. But at the end of the day, it holds back the entire working class. It is in the interest of all working people to abolish racism, and that understanding needs to be had. And that mass line is not out there. And there is a big effort to try and kind of, obscure that. Okay, right? Okay, whoa, that's an interesting one there, but we'll talk about that. Larouche, Dugan, what's the next one? ML and left syncretism. ML left syncretism. I don't even know what syncretism is. All right. But anyway, that said, I don't like a lot of what Black Hammer does. Moving on. And, again, I don't know if the person who asked that, this is going to be clipped and then that'll be used in like an attack piece on me, or if this is just someone just being honest. I don't even know. So there you go. All right. How do Marxist parties keep members principled and keep them from deviating? I don't know what that means. What does that mean? You keep them principled, you keep them from deviating. I mean, the main way I would argue that people can be kept in the right place is by connecting them with other people. When people are kind of off on their own, disconnected from other people, that's why the internet is such a crazy place for politics, right? Because a lot of the people on the internet doing what I'm doing right now, rambling, into their computer about politics. A lot of the people doing that, have never done any mass work and never done any mass organizing. The best way to keep people in line with the correct political line, is to engage them in day-to-day outreach and work. Engage them with other people. The more that people are not isolated, reading books on their own, just typing on the internet, the more that they're engaged in day-to-day outreach, in day-to-day discussions and debates with people, the more that they're doing that, the more that they are actually, at that point, the more that they're actually, they're going to stay, having the correct line. I mean, the correct line comes from correct practical experience, through engaging with people, through seeing what's really going on in the world, from traveling to countries that are struggling against imperialism, from paying attention to the real conditions people are facing. The correct line comes from being connected with the correct reality. And when people have a diluted sense of reality, when people are not involved in real struggles, so there you go. That is my argument. By engaging people in actual work in which they are connected with the masses, in which they must engage with people politically and argue with them, that is how people are able to become connected with the masses. What is Xi Jinping doing in adjusting the market sector? Well, it's this simple, right? So the market sector generally follows the general law of capitalist accumulation, which is that a capitalist enterprise must continue to grow, must continue to grow, and must continue to grow. The capitalist makes profits, and then he reinvests them in order to make more profits, and then he reinvests them in order to make more profits. And then a capitalist enterprise must always be expanding, and it must keep expanding or else it dies. And that's what happens, is as the process of competition, some capitalist enterprises continue to expand, and some of them die. And pretty soon, you have a monopoly. The market tends to naturally lead to monopolies. And the problem with that is once you have a monopoly, growth stops. You get what's called monopolistic stagnation, meaning that growth doesn't happen anymore because you have a monopoly. Well, then the government has to step in and break apart the companies in order to get competition going. And the antitrust laws that we have in the United States, a lot of the legislation we have is aimed at breaking apart monopolies in order to continue having growth, because once you get a monopoly, growth stops because the capitalist enterprise has a monopoly. And you'll notice that in the tech sector, we're letting monopolies pass. Amazon is a monopoly, and it's allowed to pass. And so the quality of Amazon's work has in some cases decreased. That's why they have very low quality books out there. If you order a book that's old enough to not have a copyright, you'll get a books that some Amazon guys cut and paste. Why? They're not competing with anybody. This is the situation. So in China, you have state-run industries that are government-run, and then you have state-subsidized corporations that don't function according to market logic, like Huawei. Huawei Technologies is technically private, but it's subsidized by the government. Its primary customer is the Chinese military. It doesn't function according to market logic, right? Huawei Technologies, it is technically not a state enterprise. It is technically a cooperative under Chinese law, but it's not really a market institution. It doesn't function according to the market logic. But then, in addition to that, you do have a market in China where there are companies that are just companies. So in order to keep growth going in the private sector and in this competitive market sector, Xi Jinping is breaking apart some of the bigger companies that have emerged in order to keep the competition going and keep the general law of capitalist accumulation in effect, keep them expanding and growing so that there's economic growth, so you don't have monopolistic stagnation. Meanwhile, the state-run enterprises are still state-run. Meanwhile, the companies that are like government-propped-up institutions that don't function, like Huawei, they still exist. But among the competitive market sector, they want to keep that growth and competition going. The general law of capitalist accumulation. That's my understanding of what's going on there. All right, so we've got 3 questions on the Texas abortion law. And I will tell you what I think is going on here, which is that I think that right now, there's a very good chance, it'll take a while. I don't think it'll happen immediately. I think Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned. I'm just being real with you. I think that Roe versus Wade, the 1972 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that made it legal in all U.S. states to have an abortion, for a woman, to have the right to choose to have an abortion, I think that's going to be overturned. And the reason that it's going to be overturned is because there's a big cultural gap in the United States between red state conservatives and liberals. Now, what they won't do is, I don't think they'll ban you from leaving another state to get an abortion. I think they'll rule that that's not legal, right? And I think that there will be programs to put women on buses for free to get an abortion that'll be paid for by Planned Parenthood. But I think in order to give a symbolic victory to conservatives, the way the Supreme Court is currently lined up with Amy Coney Barrett and all of that, I think there's a very good chance that they will overturn Roe versus Wade, and that states like Texas and Alabama and Georgia, they will ban abortion. And women in those states will be able to go to other states in order to get abortions, but they will ban abortion in red states. That's what I'm convinced will happen. Even though that's not majority opinion. Majority opinion in the United States favors keeping Roe versus Wade legal. I think that there's enough of a gap right now, and that abortion is something that the religious right, the religious conservatives in the United States, the Trump supporters, the QAnon people, it's something that you could give them that wouldn't change the U.S. structure that much, okay? And I mean, and there's probably someone watching this who's going to say, oh my God, how can you say that, Caleb? Well, what I'm saying is that abortion will be made illegal in various red states, but there will be some kind of program so that women can go to other states and get them free of charge, practically. And it will be, in a lot of states, and this is interesting, in a lot of southern states, there's like one abortion clinic in the entire state, okay? A lot of people don't know that, but, that in a lot of states, it's technically not illegal, but it is very, I think there's one abortion clinic in Georgia, if I'm not mistaken, right? And in Texas, right? Again, it's legal, but there's like 2 in the state or something like that. I think abortion should be legal. I think women should be able to get an abortion. However, yeah, I just, I think it's gonna be quite difficult. And I think that there's a good chance of that happening. And I also think that this is a cultural issue. It's a culture war. It's a culture war. It's a culture war that the mainstream of U.S. politics really wants to have, because no one ever changes their mind on this. Nobody changes their mind. There's nobody who sits there and goes, oh, so a fetus is a life. Oh, I'm against, no. There's no one who goes, oh, okay, so we can't determine if it's a life, so it should be, no one changes their mind on this. On this issue, nobody ever changes their mind on abortion. They just don't. Nobody changes their mind, ever. So it's like, it's the perfect debate. If you wanted to keep the red state, blue state thing going, and, we hate conservatives in the red states, yeah, we hate those liberals in the blue state, it's perfect. And that's what, the culture wars are perfect for keeping the status quo in the United States. They're perfect. And so they're drumming up a million ways to get the culture war going. And you can bet that it would be a huge gift to, the Young Turks and Sam Cedar and Vosh and all of them. They would love that. They would be all over that in a million days. And who else would be? Fox News. They would be all over it. And Tucker Carlson, and they would be all over this. What the ruling class of the United States is really afraid of is economic populism. Working class people saying, you know what, we might not agree about abortion, we might not agree about gay marriage, but we need a government of action to fight for working families. We need jobs and education for all. That scares the crap out of the ruling class. And on both the left and the right, they are doing everything they can to stop that from happening, right? On the right, what do they do on the right? You pay attention to anything the right wing has been saying for the past few years. It's communism, 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 communism. It's nuts. The right wing, all they talk about is communism. The Soviet Union fell in 1990, right? But all it is on the right is communism, 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 communism. Everything you don't like is communism. What? You don't like vaccines? That's communism. Oh, you don't like tennis shoes? Communism. You don't like trans people? Communism. It's weird as hell. But the right wing is obsessed with communism. Everything's communism. Why? Because they realize that a lot of the people that are rallying around the right wing and a lot of the people that voted for Donald Trump did so because they feel like there's a group of people who runs the United States who have all the money and all the wealth and the power, a ruling class. And that ruling class, they own all the big corporations and banks, the bourgeoisie, they control the means of, that there's a Marxian undertone to a lot of the right-wing populism. And that scares the ruling class like crazy because they know that if people can put two and two together and go, wait, we're mad at this elite that don't have good morals and only care about their profits and are, and they're globalists, meaning that they have these big multinational corporations that, it's only a matter of time before some of the people on the right that are mad about all the things right-wingers are going to put two and two together and realize, oh, I'm against capitalism and I'm against these wars, I'm against imperial. They don't want people to figure that out. So the right wing, they're overtime. Communism, 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 everything's communism. Look, hate communism, Meanwhile, on the left, what are they doing? Right? Anyone who talks about economics is a fascist, a red-brown, a crypto-fascist, a Nasbo, and they're going after anyone who talks about economics. Are you talking about economics? You're not really on the left. You're a Nasbo. You're a red-brown. Oh, are you talking? What? Oh, money for jobs and education, not war. That sounds a lot like Adolf Hitler. They're creating this atmosphere on the left where if you talk about anything economically left-wing, you must be a Nazi. It's the same thing they're doing on the right. The right is playing, communism, you can't say anything economically left-wing. If you do, that means you're a Nazi. That means you're a communist. And on the right, on the left, it's, you can't say anything economically left-wing. Oh, no, we only do culture wars here. We don't talk about left-wing things. If you say that, that means you're secretly This is what's going on. Because under the surface, America is ready for socialism. America is ready for class struggle politics on the left and the right. People that are rallying around Bernie Sanders, people that are rallying around Trump, all of them want socialism. They all want socialism. And so the established political movements, the fake synthetic left and this stupid right wing are sitting there and doing everything they can to tell their supporters, don't question free markets. And it's weird. All the rank and file are ready for it. The rank and file of the left, the rank and file, the whole country is ready for socialism. And they are so scared because it's only a matter of time before socialism starts to manifest itself in U.S. politics. The whole country is ready for socialist, populist arguments. And so the fake left is on a witch hunt to purge anyone who actually believes in socialism. The right wing is trying to play it, drum into their supporters that everything they're mad about, it's all because of socialism. But everybody knows it's only a matter of time before socialism enters mainstream discourse right now. And they're trying their hardest to control the message. Right? And that's why there's a hate campaign against me. That's why there's a hate campaign against anyone on the left who doesn't go along with this. That's why they've got, Jacobin Magazine and Jabba the Vosh and Bread. They are trying to control this, and it's not going to work. At the end of the day, the times cry out, here's the rose, now dance. And so, look, I think that in order to try and hold off the class struggle, having a culture war, outlawing abortion, it's going to happen. I think that they will overturn Roe versus Wade. They'll do it in a way that it is least ineffective, I think, but I think it'll happen. I think they will overturn Roe versus Wade. All right, minority and Stalin. Well, Stalin was a Georgian, right? He was not a Russian. The Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union, they had the House of Nationalities. They granted autonomy to many national minorities. That was a big part of Lenin's politics. Stalin wrote a book on the national question. I don't know what you want to say about it. Stalin, despite the fact that he was not Russian, he was Georgian, he's a lot of Russian nationalists really like Stalin. I think he was really great for the country, so it's complicated, but the Russian Revolution did enable a lot of the national minorities of Russia to have their own language, to have regional autonomy. So there you go. Manning, Glenn Greenwald. All right. Wrote it down. All right. Next question. Hitler and Mussolini's father. Well, Hitler's father was a government official, right? He was like a local government official in Austria, from what I understand. And he wanted Hitler to also be a government official, and Hitler wanted to go to art school. And so Hitler and his father had a big fight, and Hitler went to art school and kind of was disowned by his father, if I'm not mistaken. And Mussolini's father was a blacksmith and an anarchist. Mussolini's father was a blacksmith, and was in one of the like socialist guilds. He was like an anarcho-syndicalist, and so there you go. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what you want to. I don't know what more you want me to say about that. Mussolini's autobiography, you get the impression Mussolini is obsessed with violence. He just thinks violence is the greatest good. The wheels of history turn through blood. He's just obsessed with violence and killing. He went from being, a socialist to being a Sorelian syndicalist to ultimately starting the fascist movement. Hitler was never really on the left. He was this weird kind of, starving painter, bohemian type who fought in World War I, and then after the war was a police spy who spied on different radical groups, and he joined a right-wing group called the German Workers' Party that eventually became the Nazi Party. And they were funded by the British to kill communists, in the Weimar Germany period, and then eventually they made a deal with the Krupp family and the Tysons and the German banker Hjalmar Schacht to run Germany. So that's where Hitler came from. Mussolini is a different story. Mussolini was kind of a weird figure who was, he was on the left, I guess you could say. He was a social democrat, but he supported World War I, and then after that, he, at that point, he became enamored with some of the mystical right-wing socialism of George Sorel and Sorelian syndicalism. So there you go. Alibaba, yes, I mean, look, China is clamping down. They're asserting more state control over the private sector because China, at the same time that their economy is zooming ahead, they are more under attack, and they need to assert more control and make sure that the country is more disciplined in the face of the oncoming attack. And I talked about that before, about how they're breaking up some of the monopolies, and there's a lot of the socialist system in China is always changing. It is never the same. It is constantly adjusting, and that is what has made socialism in China very effective, is that it is constantly being adjusted. It is never the same, never. And that's, this isn't like a big dramatic shift that's happening now. It is a shift, and before that there was another shift, and before that was another shift. Chinese socialism is never the same, constantly evolving, constantly adapting, and that has been its strength. All right. Project Veritas going after this leftist teacher. I don't want to say too much more about that. Look, these right-wingers have no idea what socialism and communism is. I mean, you watch the school board meetings after that, and they're screaming and yelling, and I hate all these right-wingers on the one hand because they're saying they don't understand what socialism is, but then I watch the video of the guy, and it's like they're not going to learn it from him with his Antifa flag, and he's bragging there, I'm going to scare the crap out of these kids, and Jesus, I don't know, man. You shouldn't get fired for being a communist. Communists are allowed to be teachers. I sat through so many lectures by right-wing teachers that I didn't agree with. These right-wingers need to grow up. Seriously, right? If every time I had a teacher who I didn't agree with, who, was trying to get me to believe things that I don't believe, I went crying to Fox News, I'd be on there every day. I'm sorry. These right-wingers need to stop being such snowflakes, okay? I had so many right-wing conservative teachers, so many of them, okay? And I dealt with it, and I'm still a socialist, you know what I mean? And I still have my views, and you don't see me crying about it. You don't see me, oh my God, my teacher who disagreed with me, I mean, what are you afraid of? I mean, if you're raising your kids to be all good, conservative, right-wing kids, then you shouldn't have to, they should appreciate the challenge of hearing the other perspective and pushing back again. What are these, I mean, I don't know. Some of the stuff he said on the video was dumb, but he probably didn't know he was being recorded, and number one. And number two, I mean, he may not have been honest on what he was saying. He may not have been honest on the video. He may have thought he was trying to impress another left-winger or something. I don't know. I mean, I suppose that he's in the PSL or something. Well, I really doubt there was any kid who came into that class who was a right-wing kid and then he heard the teacher talk and suddenly became left-wing. I really doubt that. I think that this is a guy who has left-wing views. I guess he's associated with the PSL. And look, here's another thing I want to say, right? Part of the reason I watched the video of the right-wingers tantruming about this teacher, right? And one of the things they were saying is, oh my God, he has a picture of Mao. Mao killed millions of people. Vosh agrees with that. RedTube agrees with that. Right? I mean, you listen to the anti-communist ranting that these right-wingers were doing at this meeting. Oh my God, this teacher is and Stalin, and all the stuff they're saying is all stuff that the right wing, that RedTube would agree with. Right? I mean, if they want to destroy my life because I support China and I support Cuba and Venezuela, and they think that makes me the same as a Nazi. So if you took the word communist out of those meetings, someone should edit those meetings and replace the word communist with Vosh saying tankies. And it would be the exact same thing, the same shrill denunciation, the same calls for violence, the same attempts to smear people. It would all be the same. It would all be the same. All be the same. So, I mean, it's just, these people are shrill and whatever. And, the atmosphere they're creating on the left is basically, they would want, Vosh would want you to get beaten up and killed by Antifa if you had a picture of Stalin, I mean, that's what he says, that anyone who supports Stalin is the same as a Nazi. Anyone who supports Mao is the same as a Nazi, right? So it's like, the right wing wants you fired for having a picture of Mao if you're a teacher. Vosh wants you beaten up and killed by Antifa if you have that, because, supporting existing socialism is the same as a Nazi. So whatever. All right, next question. Larouche and Dugin, ML, and left syncretism. Well, Lyndon LaRouche is a right-wing thinker. He used to be a Trotskyist. No, he's not I wouldn't call him right-wing. They're their own thing, right? The LaRoucheites, I know some of them. I'm friendly with them. They're very into promoting China right now, and they believe in technology, but there's some fundamental disagreements we have. I am a Marxist. They do not support Marxism. They don't believe in global warming. They reject dialectical materialism. They have their own perspective, and it's not my perspective. So anyone who's telling you I'm with LaRouche, they're wrong. I mean, you can watch a chat I had with Daniel Burke, one of their main organizers, like last week, and we had a chat, and we were very clear about what the differences between us are. We don't have the same view. They have their views, I have mine. Dugin, on the other hand, that's even further from my perspective. Dugin does not believe in historical progress. Dugin is a traditionalist conservative, right? I'm definitely not a Duginist. I know of Dugin's perspective, and I've read his works, and his writing is very important if you want to understand anti-imperialism in the developing world. But Dugin is Dugin. He rejects historical progress. He has his concept of Eurasianism, traditionalist conservative. That's Dugin, right? Just because I talk to somebody does not mean I agree with everything they've ever said, okay? And, I mean, if you can't wrap your head around that now, I can't help you, right? I mean, look, the LaRouche people, I like what they do around China. I like what they do around fusion energy. Don't agree with them about climate change. Don't agree with their worldview, the American system, Friedrich List. That's not my perspective, okay? So that's the LaRouche people, all right? Dugin, traditionalist conservative, Russian thinker. Again, his overall worldview, I disagree with. But, his, anti-imperialism, fine. There's some interesting stuff. His emphasis on liberalism. And some of it's interesting, but overall, traditional conservatism, rejecting historical progress, not my view. So then the person asks, what's the difference between Marxism, Leninism, and syncretism? Well, here's the thing. So first of all, I would say I'm heavily influenced by Marxism, Leninism. That's probably the primary political influence on me. I studied Marxism, Leninism for many years. I'm on here talking about Stalin and Mao and Lenin and Party of New Type and all of that. So, ML is a big influence on me. But I call myself a 21st century socialist because arguably we're in a new period. The Soviet Union's not going to come back. They're not going to rebuild Soviet-style economies. Socialism has changed a lot since the Cold War. So ML is the biggest political influence on me, but I am a 21st century socialist. I'm saying that we're doing something new. If you look at what the Soviet Union, or if you look at what China is doing, socialism with Chinese characteristics, you look at what the Bolivarian movement is doing, you look at what's going on in Iran and in Syria, the anti-imperialism and the anti-capitalism in the world today has changed. So while ML is a huge influence on me, ML, classic ML, Cold War style politics, that's not the future. And I mean, that's a hard pill for some people to swallow, but there you go. I don't know what left syncretism is. I don't know what that is, right? Again, is this one of these boogeymen, right? Nazbols. The only Nazbol that I've ever met, was a Nazi who I debated named Eric Stryker. Eric Stryker's not a Nazbol. He's a Nazi. Right? The guy's a Nazi. He's an admirer of Hitler. He's a Holocaust denier. He's a white supremacist. He's not a Nazbol. He's a Nazi. Right? Alexander Dugin was part of the Nazbol party at one point, but now he's a traditionalist conservative. Right? So Nazbols don't really exist anymore. There was a political party in Russia that dissolved a long time ago that Dugin was part of, but he's no longer part of it, and his views have significantly changed. Right? And then everyone I've ever met who claims to be a Nazbol, they're not Nazbol, they're Nazis. They're just Nazis, right? It's a matter of emphasis. Some Nazis want to emphasize the economic stuff or something, but you scratch them, they're white supremacists, they're Nazis, right? And everyone they hate's a communist. They're racist right-wingers. So Nazbols are not a thing, okay? There is no red-brown alliance, okay? There's no, secret meetings where neo-Nazis and Marxists are sitting there. How can we divert the effective liberal agenda? How can we assert... No, there are no red-browns, okay? There are no red-browns. There are no Nazbols. I don't know what left syncretism is, but it sounds like another one of these boogeyman terms, okay? I'm a Marxist. I'm a leftist. I have been. My views have adopted and evolved over time, and I'm engaged in political innovation, meaning I want to change socialism so that we can win. But I'm not engaged in some kind of attempt to merge right-wing and left-wing politics. No, right? No. I am simply a leftist who is trying to find an effective way to make socialism, popular and get the United States out of capitalism. And I want to reach the broad masses of people, and I want to get out of the movement and to the masses. And if you don't agree with me, fine. I'm not bothering you. Go and do whatever you want. I'm not bothering you. If you want to join the XYZ, ISO, RCP, PSL, CPUS, do whatever you want. I'm not bothering you. I am no threat to you. I am doing my thing. I'm not organizing protests. I am engaging in education. I'm having educational conferences. If you don't agree with what I am saying, don't come to those conferences. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, don't watch this YouTube channel. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, when you see the John Brown volunteers on the streets of New York and they go to hand you a leaflet, you can turn away and say not interested. I am not bothering you. We are not bothering you. We are coming together. We are building our socialist community. We are trying to spread our message. We are not bothering you. We have not bothered you in any effective way. So the fact that there are so many people who, despite the fact that we have done absolutely nothing to bother them, have to go out of their way to smear us, threaten physical violence against us, accuse us of things that we haven't done. I mean, this is beyond crazy to me, right? We're not bothering you in any way, conceivable way. And these people I've never met before, all kinds of people I've never met before, who I swear are sitting around and going, how can we stop him? How can we stop the senator? This can't happen. He's not allowed to do that. We've got to stop. Why? Why? Do your own thing. Do it better than me. If you don't like the way I teach Marxism, if you don't like the Saxton lectures, why don't you go rent a room, get a bunch of your friends together, and give your own speech about Marxism? And put it on the internet and try to get your friends to watch it. You don't like, the message that the John Brown volunteers are distributing when they promote the city building tendency. Why don't you get your own leaflets, build your own think tank, and spread your message? I'm not stopping you from doing that. And when you do that, I will not spread lies about you. I will not harass you on the street and try to make a problem. I will not smear. I'll let you do your own thing. And if your own thing is better than mine and gets the USA more effectively to socialism, I'll probably observe it, and I might try to learn from what you're doing to make my work more effective. I don't get this. There is all these people who don't do very much, right? They don't do very much. They don't have classes. They don't make YouTube videos. They don't go out and promote socialism. But they are determined to stop all the people that do because they're doing it wrong and they can't do it. They're doing it wrong. Well, I'm sorry. If you think I'm doing it wrong, go do it yourself. You think this is easy? You think this is easy? We're working very hard to do what we do. If you don't like what I'm doing, go do it yourself. But there's all these people that they can't do it themselves. Why? I don't know. I mean, they've got 10 times the resources I've got. They've got 10 times the connections I've got. But they can't do it themselves. Oh no, they can't do it themselves, but they got to stop me from doing it. That's nuts. It's insanity, and it could be something worse than that. And I'm not stopping. I am not stopping. So I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing, right? I've got a decent job. I have a decent family, and I'm married and all of that. But I believe in socialism. This is what gets me up in the morning. This is what I believe in. I am an optimistic, constructive socialist. And I'm not going to stop doing this just because you disapprove of me, right? So if you disapprove of me, do what I do. There's a lot of people on the internet that I disapprove of. Sometimes I debate them because it's productive, and sometimes I'll tweet at them and have arguments with them because it makes a scene and more people come around. But at the end of the day, if I don't like somebody, for the most part, I ignore them. I just don't pay any attention to them. I ignore them. So I do not understand these people who are supposedly socialists, supposedly communists, supposedly think that I am the wrong kind of socialist, the wrong kind of communist. They think I'm no good. But instead of doing it themselves, I don't see their videos promoting socialism. I don't see their lectures on Marxism. I don't see the books they're writing. I don't see what they're doing. But Caleb can't do it. Caleb's got to be stopped. You got to stop Caleb. You got to stop him. He's so dangerous. No, I'm not. I'm really not that dangerous, right? I'm doing my own thing. You can go do your thing. I really don't get it. And the fact that you are so, all right, tell it. The fact that you are so determined to stop me rather than just put out your own stuff is pretty darn weird. Pretty darn weird, all right? Pretty darn weird. And that's all I can say about that. I'm not a left syncretist. I'm not a red-brown. I am not a Nazbol. I'm not part of a secret red-brown. I'm doing what I think is the right thing to do. That's generally what you should do. If you're a socialist, if you're a good person, I recommend that you do what you think is the right thing to do. That's that. Alrighty. Next question. Alrighty. Fight between Chelsea Manning, I'm sorry. It's Chelsea. Bradley was before they became trans, so now it's Chelsea Manning. And Chelsea Manning and Glenn Greenwald. Well, look, I looked into that. It's disappointing. It's very, very disappointing. And again, again, the toxicity of all of this. They clearly disagree on many different things. Okay? But Glenn Greenwald's not a Nazi, and neither is Chelsea Manning. Chelsea Manning got photographed at some event with somebody. Glenn Greenwald believes in dialogue with the right wing and is kind of against the liberal establishment. They both say things that I don't agree with, but neither of them are Nazis, and neither of them deserve to be canceled, and both of them have something very important to say. And the way, this whole, do you denounce so-and-so? Cut that crap out. Cut it out. Cut it out. It doesn't help, all right? Doesn't help. You know, if someone does something and you want to make clear, hey, I disagree with that, fine. But this, you know, oh, do you denounce? Cut it out. Cut it out. Cut it out. Cut it out. Stop it. Please stop it. Okay? It's toxic. You can't do anything anymore. You can't organize with anybody. Everyone's this, everyone's that, everyone's got skeletons in their closet. Everyone's dirty laundry is out on the internet. Everybody, I mean, this is disgusting. It's disgusting. We've made a whole culture by tearing people down on Twitter, exposing people, tearing people down. Stop it. It disgusts me. I am disgusted by it. I want to build communities of solidarity based on love, and if you have a flaw, I forgive you for it. I forgive you for your flaws. You know, you have made mistakes in your life. You still don't agree with me on some vital issues. I forgive you for it because you're a human. And part of being a human is recognizing that there are other humans out there. Not everyone's going to agree on everything, and people make mistakes. There are things I have said in the past that I regret. There are things I have done in the past that I regret. And you know what? If you're honest with yourself, if you're really honest with yourself, there are some things that you have done in your past that you regret also. There are some things that you've said in the past that you regret also. There are some things that if you could go back and take them back, you would. There are some things that if you could go back and not say them, you would. Okay? And there are also some things, I'm sure, every single person watching this right now, there is something that I have said on one of these streams that you say, Caleb, you're wrong about that. And you know what? That's okay. You're welcome here. You're welcome here. I don't care. You think I'm wrong? Look, I believe in God. A lot of communists don't believe in God. A lot of communists are strict dialectical materialists. If you don't believe in God, fine. I don't care. I'm not here to convince you of the existence of God. That's between me and God. And your religious beliefs are your religious beliefs, and that's that. Right? What else? I think that China is a socialist society. A lot of socialists out there, they say, you know what, Caleb, China, the market reforms, they're not a socialist society. You don't think China's a socialist society? I'll argue with you. I'll disagree with you. But that's okay. We can disagree. And, look, again, I want to bring people together. I want to build a community of solidarity. I want to bring people together to put forward policy solutions to save America from the nightmare of capitalism. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And this downward spiral where everyone's this and everyone's that, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse. I can't. You got to learn to say no to this. You've got to learn to say no to this toxic stuff. We have a toxic culture created by social media. It's a downward spiral. You need to learn to be a city builder. You need to learn to be a city builder. Every morning, I wake up with classical music. And every night, I go to sleep with classical music. I put on Bach and Beethoven, Mozart, Haydn. I just try to detoxify all this negativity, all this rage, all this destructive energy. Again, that's what I was trying to tell you yesterday. We've got to learn to love each other. We've got to learn to forgive each other. One thing that I've learned in life is to, when someone lets you down, rather than getting angry with them, learn from it and say, this is this person's limitation. Right? People have their limitations. Not everyone can do what you can do. Not everyone can do what you want them to do. But when you meet people, a lot of people fall into this trap of having like a honeymoon period. They meet somebody, a new friend, a new coworker, a new romantic partner, a new associate, and the person can do no wrong, and they're hot shit, and they're the best, and then that person lets them down, and they go, fuck them. And that's the kind of person that can't maintain lasting relationships because no one's able to let them down. Look, there are things about me that will probably let you down. One way or another, I am going to let you down. I'm going to let you down. And if that ends it between us, that's on you. But, the best relationships I've had have been relationships where I get to know the person better. When the person lets me down, I recognize, aha, this is this person's weakness. And, people can grow. Once you recognize the person's weakness, you can gradually kind of nudge them to be better in some cases, not always. But rather than viewing the person's failure as just proof that they're no good, you can view the person letting you down as an opportunity to recognize that person's limitations. People can serve different places in your life, right? You can be expecting that this person might be the person who's going to change everything, and that may not work, but they may still be a good person to have in your life, even if they're not everything you hoped they would be. People have different roles in their life. The roles in people's life changes over time, right? You think about your parents, right? When you're a small child, your parents are one thing. When you're a teenager, your parents are another thing. When you're an adult, your parents are something different. And, the relationship that you have with your parents changes as you grow and get older, right? It does. And so, maybe your parents weren't very good to you when you were a small child, but maybe as an adult, the relationship can flourish. Maybe they weren't very, very good to you as a teen, but they were very good to you when you were a small child. That relationships change. People aren't always the same thing, and they're not always what you expect them to be. So the main thing is to just try and navigate this social world in a forgiving way and in a calmer way. The less desperate you can be, the more you can just kind of take things in one little bit at a time, the happier you'll be. And that's my rant about that. So the last question that somebody asked me, the very last question I got here, is the Taliban anti-imperialist? Well, right now they seem to be wanting to do business with China. They seem to be, at this point, they look like they are moving in an anti-imperialist direction, but I don't trust them. And this withdrawal, the United States did hand the country over to them, for goodness sakes, and I don't trust the Taliban. That said, they seem to be moving in an anti-imperialist direction, but I'm skeptical. But we shall see. We shall see how they develop. Right now, because they want to do business with China, because, they look like they might be stabilizing the country. Okay, but I don't trust them. I don't trust the Taliban. I'll just be honest with you. I don't trust the Taliban. But, they seem to be, we'll see. We'll see. That's all I got to say about that. And on that note, I will end this stream. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. While the danger of a new world war still exists and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. Fusion City must be built. Fusion City now. Fusion City now. Fusion City now.